Hey everybody, Scott Dion Brown here with another episode of Cooking with Scott. But of course this week we're not going to be cooking anything at all. Yes, Halloween is just around the corner, and of course it's everybody's favorite time of year, but you're always asking yourself that age-old question: what am I gonna carve my jack-o'-lantern? Or perhaps this is your first time carving a jack-o'-lantern, and you're sitting there looking at a pumpkin, frantically searching YouTube on the day of Halloween, thinking, how do I do this, and what am I going to carve? Well, if that's you, this is your lucky day, because I'm gonna show you guys how I like to carve a jack-o'-lantern. So when carving your jack-o'-lantern, you could go traditional. You know, the standard triangle eyes, triangle nose, and a big smiling mouth. That works great, but I found with just a little bit of planning, you can make that jack-o'-lantern extra special and something that the kids will really like. So I've decided today to carve a FNAF pumpkin, specifically one of Nightmare Freddy. And full disclosure, I've never done this before. This is my first attempt at carving a FNAF pumpkin, so if it looks terrible, at least you'll know what not to do. Now, just because I'm doing that, that doesn't mean that you can't use this as a tutorial for how to carve a jack-o'-lantern in general, because the steps are all pretty much the same. So let's get to it, starting with all of the tools you're gonna need to get this job done. So first up, you will need a knife. Now, you could go to the store and buy one of those. They make a little kit. It's like basically a serrated blade made specifically for carving pumpkins. You could do that and that will work for you, but if you have a kitchen, you very likely already have something that's going to work just as well, if not better. All you really need is a knife with a serrated blade, something like this. This is just I guess a steak knife of some kind, I think. Yeah. This is a larger one, but basically what you want is something with a serrated blade. If you have something like a chef's knife, this will be good for like getting into the pumpkin, but you're gonna find you're gonna have a hard time carving any actual shapes out of it. Also, if you're somebody who uses tools or knows somebody who has them, a drywall saw is a very sharp type of saw. It's similar to this pointed tip with a very sharp blade. That'll cut through pumpkins fantastic. So that's another option. But this is all you need. Optional but helpful is something a large spoon or even a regular size spoon to help you scoop out the guts. I have here a marker. This is a Sharpie brand permanent marker. It's just for you to draw a guide on the pumpkin. A pencil will work, a pen will work. I'm using a marker because it'll show up really well on camera, and you can use this as well. Optional, depending on what you carve, I have some toothpicks here, which I'll show you. Those will come in handy a little bit later. So once you have your pumpkin, you get home, the first step, regardless of what you're carving, is you've got to empty it out. So you could do this freehand, but I would say grab your marker, and all you're going to do is draw a circle around the top. And the circle, the size of this hole is not that relevant, but you basically want to make it large enough that you can easily get your hand in there. Next, all you're doing is you're going to take your knife, stick it in the top, and cut all the way around. Now, what you want to make sure you do though is, when you stick the knife in, make sure you stick it in on a diagonal facing towards the center of the pumpkin, okay? You're doing this so that it's sloped inwards all the way around. If you cut it straight down, the pumpkin lid will fall straight into the pumpkin. You don't want that. You want to be able to sit the lid on there and it'll stay on there without falling inside the pumpkin. So you carve it on an inward angle. Knife going in at an angle, about 45 degrees, I guess. And now you just work your way around. Again, following the line that you drew, and keeping the knife pointing towards the center of the pumpkin. Once you've gone all the way around, pull the top off, take your bucket, keep that at the side. Now for this bit, you'll see this kind of messy part. All I do is I take my knife and I cut that off to make it look flat. There you go. So this now will work as a pumpkin lid, you see? And it looks pretty good. So now you can set this aside. Next thing I'll do is, you see here it's kind of hard to reach in. What I'll do first is go around the inside edge and sort of cut off the excess. So now this is what you've got, the inside of the pumpkin. So now there's no clean way to do this. You just gotta get in there with your hands and pull this stuff out. Just reach in there. Now, this stuff, if you're gonna make a puking pumpkin, a vomiting pumpkin, which I've seen people do, you can save some of this stuff because it looks great as the vomit coming out of the mouth. That's not what this pumpkin is, but note to self, you can keep it. This is where the large spoon can come in handy. It's especially good for scraping the sides. You basically just want to get it all off the walls and reach in there and get out all the gunk. And if while you're pulling this stuff out, you suddenly notice that your dog has gone crazy and started eating that stuff, and you're terrified that your dog's gonna die because he ate all this stuff, don't worry, I already Googled it. Your dog won't die from eating pumpkin stuff. Apparently the innards are actually pretty good for him. That might be a personal experience. So you just keep scraping the insides with your big spoon. You reach in and scoop it out. So there you have it, a perfectly hollowed out pumpkin. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, just enough that it looks pretty clean inside. And your lid will sit on there nicely. All right, the messy part is over. Your pumpkin is now hollow. Now comes the fun part. So if you're not, a visual artist or something, or you've never done this before, it's probably a bad idea to just start hacking away freehand with your knife. In terms of choosing what you want to do, even if it is a classic traditional pumpkin design, you should still plan a little bit in advance exactly what you want it to be. That's where the marker comes in. Now, if you're doing something a little more complicated or unique, such as a Five Nights at Freddy's design, Google is definitely your friend. So I've got my laptop just right here. Bring up some pictures, do a Google image search, and just start taking a look at what it is you want to do. Now here's the thing to remember. I'm looking right now at photos of Nightmare Freddy, and if you're doing that, maybe you're doing the same thing. Now, it looks complicated, it might be a little bit overwhelming, but what you're actually looking for here is you're not going to be recreating a three-dimensional image or anything like that. What you're actually looking for here are what are the basic, essential elements of Nightmare Freddy's face, or whatever it is you're doing, that when people see it, they'll know what it is. You don't need all that detail. You're not going to be doing any shading. You're not going to be doing anything. You're basically doing almost a super, super basic drawing of what this would be. So what I'm going to do is I'll take my marker, grab some paper. So now I'm looking at this picture, and you guys can see here what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at a few different pictures. What are your basic elements that make Nightmare Freddy Nightmare Freddy? So what I'm looking here, I'm seeing his nose. It seems to be almost a triangle. So I'm going to start right in the middle of the page. I'm going to draw an upside down triangle nose. Then also very, very prominent are his eyes. He's got these giant, scary, round eyes, which are basically just circles. So I'm going to draw on the eyes. There you go. Next, teeth. He's got lots and lots of teeth, and it looks like he's got two almost hamburger patty-shaped parts of his mouth, the top and the bottom. So we'll start with the top one. Big circle like that. And in some versions, he has a line in the middle, some he doesn't. Let's put one there. And a big hamburger bun, sorry. Hamburger bun on the top and the bottom. And then just lots and lots of teeth. And then outside of that, it looks like a lot of pictures have like these two lines over top of his eyes. He's got ears and a hat. That's Nightmare Freddy. There's not much else to him. You don't have to worry about all the extra details. In terms of jack-o'-lanterns, every element that you see needs to be a hole, right? So his eyes are not going to be drawn on like a circle. Those are going to be holes. Okay, so any areas that are just lines, you have to think, instead of it being an actual line, it's actually a thin hole. That's the only other thing you have to think of. So you kind of have to make a decision what the holes will be and how that'll be. So I'll show you how I'll do that here. So ideally you want to make it fairly symmetrical. The way I do that is just start with an element that's in the middle of the face or the middle of your design and then work out from that. So in this case, it's the nose. So what I'll do, I'm going to find a spot in the middle, more or less, and that's when I'm going to do the nose. just a triangle. So now, everything you draw after that, every part of the face you draw outside of that nose, you can now work from that and make that your center point, just to make sure that everything is balanced. From there, let's draw the eyes. Same idea. This is the middle of my face, so it'll be a big circle about here. And again, if you draw the circle and you find it's not perfect, just make it a little bit larger, because you're gonna be cutting this whole part out anyway. So there's your eye. And so now you've drawn your eye and you kind of go, okay, it's about this far from the nose. So then you're gonna go about the same distance and draw the next one. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. But, just take a look at it and make sure that the eyes are about the same size. So now you've got your two eyes. So the other thing I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna draw a straight line that will be sort of the top of his mouth, and another line that'll be the bottom of his mouth, about like that. And now we're just gonna put a whole bunch of teeth in there and just make them really sharp, just a zigzag line. So you wanna make sure that it goes from this end to this end and it stops about the same point at the eyes. And now same thing for the bottom. So now because it's a hole, I'm gonna just draw a line at the end to sort of cut the whole thing, and then I'm gonna cut out that entire bottom part. Now to make it a bear, he's got, like I said, the hamburger bun mouth, and then same with the bottom, hamburger bun bottom of his mouth. There he is. Now what I'm gonna do, I've decided for his ears, I'm gonna stick them onto the side. These eye holes that I'm gonna cut out, they're gonna be about the right size for his ears. So I'm gonna cut those out, and then I'm gonna use toothpicks and attach the ears on there. And then his hat will be something extra. I'll probably make something to be his hat. The only other thing that's left is, I guess, these two lines, which I guess I'll do like that so that I can actually cut that part out. The same thing I just did for his eyes, I have to do the same thing for this area around his mouth. If I were to just cut this whole part out, that entire part will fall inside the pumpkin. And I don't want that. Really, I want these just to look like a thin line. So his nose will be a full hole. And then out here, you have to leave a little bit of space for where it's gonna be attached. So I'll probably do some kind of hole like this. And it'll go maybe down to the edge of his mouth, like that. Same thing here. Go about there. And the same for underneath here. That goes all the way along the bottom, like that. Because this is gonna be seen at night on the street, you have to remember that anything that's not a hole in the pumpkin, it's not really gonna be visible in the dark. There needs to be light from the inside of the pumpkin coming out for it to be visible, which means his ears, if I were just to stick these pieces of pumpkin on here, at night, they may not be visible. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, right where I'm gonna stick the ear, which will be right here, I'm gonna cut a little slit right here. That's gonna go right in front of the ear so that hopefully light from the light inside will come up and shine on the ear itself. So I'll do that on both sides. Just a little slit. And again, that's just so that there'll be light shining on the ears. All right, so now you've got the face drawn on. Your next step is to start carving. Similar to how you cut this hole, you stick it in and saw all the way around. Now the only difference is with this one, you were kind of carving towards the inside of the hole so that it doesn't fall in. This time you're gonna do the opposite. You'll find it's a little bit better for allowing light to travel out of the pumpkin. You're gonna cut either straight into the pumpkin, pointing straight down, or even a little bit outwards from the hole. All right, so we're taking our knife. Why not start with the nose? And again, now this time I'm gonna carve away from the hole. Now you don't need to rush this, just work slowly. Now you're gonna have an easier time than me because you're not gonna have to worry that people can see this on camera. Go. And just like that, you've got your nose. Same goes for the eye. Go. There's our next hole. Go. And then once you push your pieces in, you can just reach inside the pumpkin and pull it out. Now, of course, these two eyes are going to be his ears, so I'll just take them out and set them aside. Now, his mouth, which again, it's a bunch of straight lines, so it's not complicated, but it's gonna take a while. So now I move to the bottom row. So now the only thing I'm being careful of now as I do the bottom row is that I don't accidentally cut into the teeth on the top row. Okay. So now, just reach in and start pulling out our bits. All that's left are his eyebrows. Just careful not to cut into his eye. Go. I will cut the little slit for his ear. I'll just double check the size, so that'll work. It's just to make sure that his ear is visible. That's one. And two. The top and bottom parts of his mouth. So we'll start with the top one. There we go. So that's one. Now a little tip, if while you're doing stuff like this, let's say I'm cutting along here and I actually cut into his eye, or I cut a piece that I didn't want to cut and it falls in the pumpkin, it's not the end of the world. Toothpicks are really useful for that. You just grab a toothpick, you stick one part into the part that fell out and stick it into the part where it was attached, and you just reattach it. So it's very flexible if you run into some trouble. I've gotten lucky so far, but there's still time to mess up. Bottom bit, and for that it might be easier just to tilt the pumpkin up. And there we go. So I've got the two pieces that were his eyes, and the only thing I'm going to do first is I'll grab the knife and I'm just going to clean them up a little bit, and then I'm also going to make one side slightly flat so that I can go easily onto the pumpkin. Cut that flat, and same with here. Depending how fancy you want to be, you could like carve a slight hole, like a little indent in the ear. So to do that, I mean, be very careful, but I'm just going in here with the knife and sort of just cutting a little wedge into the ear. Like that. Same with this one. Now the thing I want to stress here, what I'm doing is I'm not pressing hard with the knife. I'm kind of rocking it back and forth so it goes in. You don't want to press hard, especially if you're cutting something in your palm, because your palm can be cut by blades. So if you're a child watching this, maybe get mom and dad to help with this part. I'm going to take my toothpick, stick it in, like so. So I'm going to stick the thing on right at the edge of this hole, because I want the light to come out of this hole and shine on the ear. So there's one. Same thing with the next guy on this side. There we go. And that is pretty much your Freddy carved pumpkin. The other thing also now, Freddy wears a hat. So this isn't exactly what you'd want, but I had this left over. This is just a Happy New Year hat that I accidentally ruined by dropping a candle next to it and splashing wax all over it. That's another story. But all I'm gonna do is just take this scissors and cut off the Happy New Year. You can prop it on there. Now again, Freddy's hat is much smaller. So what I would actually probably do with this is cut up this hat and actually physically make it smaller. So like if I just cut it at the back, like that, about halfway through, you can then fold the hat into itself, you see, and make it a tinier hat. Something like this. There you go. That's much more Freddy's size. And then you just prop it on there. Bam. Now, a few things to note. If you used a pencil, right, then you're not going to be able to see these sort of extra marks that are left over. I used a marker. So if you're worried about that, then yeah, you should use a pencil, something you can even wash off. However, the thing to remember also is that this pumpkin is not going to be seen during the day. So what you're really going for is how it looks at night, which means the only real way to see if this pumpkin's gonna work is if you take your candle and light it up. Now, one thing I will say, I mean, candle is the traditional way to do this, but in reality, I mean, there are a lot of really cool options now. You can get like LED type lights. I've seen people put green or red like glow sticks inside to make it a more eerie look. So take a trip to your hardware store and you'll find other lighting options. But for now, you go with the traditional candle, put it in there. Because what you want to do ideally is you should, if you have some time, put your candle in, turn off all the lights, and put it in a dark room. Because what you want to do is make sure, you want to see how the light is shining through it. So, for example, like in some of these tiny lines, you know, it looks good when you're looking at it, but it's not until you turn the lights off and you actually take a look where you can actually see what needs to be done. So let's turn off the lights and take a look at this thing. Alright, so it's not bad. It's not bad. Only areas I think I went wrong, the eyes maybe are a little bit too big and should be a little closer together. I also noticed that the nose isn't exactly a triangle, so I did make a few adjustments in the shape. It's got more of a rounded look to it, so I added that helped. But I think it's enough, especially once you add the mini hat, that people will know what it is. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope this video gave you some ideas on how you're gonna carve your jack-o'-lantern. And are you gonna go with FNAF? Are you gonna go with Pokemon? Are you gonna go with something else? Let me know in the comments down below. Smash the like button if you like what you saw, and subscribe if you're new. So we'll see you next time on Scott Cooks Food. Cooking with Scott was the name of this show. So we'll see you on the next episode of this.